back after a brief sabbatical, I would say, from the values workshop. And it's such a nice thing that when he says yes immediately. And when he says no, he makes me very patient and says, wait, we shall do this next week or next to next week. So it's always a pleasant surprise to have you on the show. Welcome, Hemant.
As always, Bunty, I think it's a great thing to co-hold the space and co-sense and co-discover. So yeah.
Thank you. So we are talking about the much talked about 90-hour week that has been in the news of late. Okay, let me start with a question that I didn't think of before this. So there was a time when I had recently joined advertising and got into a big agency. And this was the structure that whenever there was work and there were deadlines, that your day or night did not matter. So one little episode that happened. So there was where I used to sit. There was a line of executive secretaries who used to sit. So 5 or 6 of them used to sit. So one of these days at around 6:30, the last of them walked away from near my desk. And I looked at them and then I realized, oh, I'm supposed to leave at this time too. But I have never known that. Because of the fun element, mostly. They were friends and there was work and it was a creative uh, discussion most of the time, even if there was no direct work involved. But I didn't know anything before, say, 9:30 in the night. Oh, now I need to go to, leave the office kind of thing. And many times it wasn't even that. It was beyond that. It would be 11 or 12. And I used to be proud of the fact now that I remember. So when we're talking 90-hour weeks and blaming the bosses or whoever is calling for such hard work, how much of it is our responsibility as well? Do you want to start there? Because that's a unusual take to have, perhaps.
Yeah. Um, I would like to start with a few caveats. One is I haven't really followed through the actual statement and what was said before the statement and after the statement.
Okay.
Um, I have also not followed the gentleman in question, his earlier commentaries on stuff and his leadership style. What is a priority for his organization right now? Um why is he saying what he's saying? So I don't have a context of that. So I should be mindful that when I make a comment, I'm um, interpreting it in a very limited way and then commenting on that. Um, I think I'll just like to take a step back and uh, there are so many things that you invoked, Manti. One is a personal experience of my own relationship with work over a period of time. Uh, I can clearly recall certain times in my certain phases in my work life when there used to be this natural flow experience, what psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi calls as flow experience, where you actually lose sense of time and effort.
Yeah.
You want to be in it. You're so dancing in that thing that you want to be grooved in it. And it doesn't feel like effort at all, even if there is an effort involved. Um, and in that, when I look back, I had two distinctions. One is where I'm doing my work and I'm working on something, and I may not necessarily be working with somebody at that particular time, which is today called as sync work and async work. Right now we are having a sync conversation. You and I have to be on this podcast at the same time. We have to synchronize to make this podcast happen. But let's say we were doing an email, it would be async. You would send me something, then I would send you something, and we could do it at a slightly more different time. So I actually have two by two here. One is a sync work flow experience and async work flow experience with somebody or without somebody.
Okay.
So I think I've had more uh, individual flow experience than group flow experiences in my work life till about a certain time in my life. till about a time when I did not have self-awareness, I did not have meditation and other practices. And what it tells me is there is a natural flow that we experience, natural liking, natural preferences. We like somebody, we like doing some things, and there is a naturalness to it. Now, that word naturalness would have been conditioned over a period of time in our genetic upbringing, culture,
Yeah.
parental upbringing, and so on. But till the time that I had that naturalness, I used to have a very impulsive way of looking at, oh, this is interesting, this is not interesting. This is likable, this is not likable.
Okay.
But then over a period of time, when I've been blessed to cultivate practices of meditation, I've been able to see the integration of the non-interesting, the boring, the banal, the difficult, the effortful, the awkward, the into the opposite of all of this, and the meaning of that, how it shapes me as a human being, how it shapes my meaning and purpose in life. So from that standpoint, from my personal experience, I think there is the natural flow experience individually and natural flow experience in group. There is a cultivated flow experience individually and a cultivated flow experience in group. Uh, so one aspect of it is definitely a direct responsibility of the individual to be able to create those flow experiences and not lean just on the natural. I'll halt here. If you want, I can continue on this.
So this has been very vague as a statement as of right now. I do not know what you're intending to uh, walk in which direction.
Yeah.
So will you be able to throw some light on what are you trying to communicate with this, what you just said?
Yes, Kunti. So whenever we look at a statement, let's say somebody made a comment about a 90-hour week or a 70-hour week. Uh, the first intuition that I have because of the practices that I have in the last 12 years is there is more to it. And
Okay.
and then suppose somebody says that's a problem statement, it's a challenge statement, it's a pain statement, and it needs to be addressed. Then the question always comes. In fact, in human history, if you just take a step back, you can filter the human history as saying that whenever the problems have risen in the society or civilization or relationship, you either said the individual is responsible, or the institution is responsible. तो या तो इंस्टीट्यूशन में कमी है या इंडिविजुअल में. अब यहाँ पे इंस्टीट्यूशन कैन बी वेरी स्ट्रक्चर्ड इंस्टीट्यूशंस लाइक constitutional institutions or law institutions or organizations, and you have very explicit rules. But then institution could also be norms, cultural norms. So कई बार हम कहते हैं कि the problem is with the institution or the problem is with the individual. My meditation tells me over a period of time that different individuals in different groups feel differently facilitated and differently oppressed by institutions. Uh, and if I hold that statement true, then maybe a 90-hour work week single bumper sticker uh, might be useful for someone and might be scathing, terrifying for someone. For example, people who are neurodiverse, uh, who for whom just if I ask somebody to just lift this cell phone now, you might wonder, ये तो simple सा उठा के बोल रहे हैं. But there are people in this world, a large number of people in the world, who can't even lift this up for various reasons. They're neurodiverse. People who are schizophrenic or going through mental health challenges, or people who've been scarred recently by grief or loss. Uh, so I think making a statement blanket for everyone, and I don't know whether that was the intention, but I don't think that the society can hold such statements. If it is an aspiration for a certain category of people that you want to push towards, I don't know whether this is the right way of motivating people or inducing fear or discipline in them.
Wonderful. Uh, so a lot of thoughts keep running in the head in terms of how one's experiences have shaped oneself. So I'll stick to what I started with, because that seems like a very interesting point of view to have, where the person who's working has decided for subtler reasons. You mentioned the flow state, and so very often one tends to succeed because one is around, and the opportunities come and you've taken advantage and you picked up a job or a responsibility that came because you were there and nobody was there, and you delivered, and people started thinking that you're good at it, and then it continued, and you reach a point where you think you're better off than your peers in some manner. And then along with the success of it, there is also the um so what you did perhaps was a one-off, but it has now become a habit because everybody says कि okay बंटी तो है ही यार, वो कर देगा, वो रात को लेट बैठ ही जाता है और अच्छा काम करता है, सुबह डिलीवर हो जाता है. So you start using people's expectations of you and forget your own version of why you did things, because you're superimposing the reality as understood by all in terms of just results. But what uh, impact it has on your health or your mental health or your personal relationships, you're completely immune to that, perhaps, because, or absolutely ignorant of that as well. So there were times when one has missed birthdays and anniversaries and family functions very, very regularly because you thought what you were doing was far more important than what they were asking of you. So my question to you is there also a, when we talk about work, is there a misplaced sense of that it is more important than the rest of it in terms of relations with others, which may not necessarily be contributing to the work as we see it? I mean, you can actually end up saying that, oh, networking kar raha tha and all. So that is a separate thing. And some people actually do that as also very well. But right now, I don't want to get into smaller um, demarcations of, okay, this is this, this is this. Do you think our ability to look at work in our younger days, and I mean younger days for myself, so has been flawed in a way, or do you want to look at that? What you mentioned so far is the problem statement in a very holistic way, where you're bringing down meanings of institutions and individuals. While I have questions about that as well, but suppose we were to continue this individual's own responsibility in this scenario, would you want to contribute something to that?
Mm. I think there could be different ways in which we can come at this, Bunty. One is uh, I think we're going a little deeper into the transactional, beyond the transactional world then, because then we are invoking the question about, there are some metaphysical questions, there are some uh, existential questions that we ask of ourselves कि ये क्या है, सब क्या है, मैं कौन हूँ, मैं क्या हूँ, मुझे क्या करना चाहिए, क्या सही है, क्या गलत है. So we enter into this whole domain of metaphysics and epistemology and axiology, as it is called in Darshan Shastra in India or philosophy in the Western world, where you try and ask deeper questions than just, mindless pursuit. Even if it's a flow experience, you just stop. You just ask yourself, even because not all flow experiences could be good. You might be. We all know experiences where we worked hours and hours and hours without food, and then suddenly, over a period of time, we realized it affected our bodies. And then we realized, had we had more discipline about having food, we would have been slightly different, better off. Um, so yes, definitely from that standpoint, it definitely warrants an individual to, as Prasad Kaipa, a brilliant Silicon Valley coach, says, uh, "What are you doing when you're doing what you're doing?"
Mhm.
It's an interesting way that he puts this. What are you really doing when you're doing what you're doing? Like अभी हम बात कर रहे हैं, हम जो कर रहे हैं क्यों कर रहे हैं, मतलब उसके पीछे का जो क्यों है वो डीपर कितने लेवल पे हम लोग जाते हैं, जाके उसको यहाँ पे लेके आते हैं और इंटीग्रेट करते हैं. So that definitely becomes important at the level of individual. But at least if I look at from my own personal experience, different people have different consciousness quotient in life. I had very different consciousness quotient 12 years back, 13 years back, or 20 years back. Um, and when I look back, I could pretty much see that जब मैं वो जो कर रहा था तो उसकी कॉन्टेक्स्ट थी, कॉन्शियसनेस एक रोल प्ले कर रहा था, मेरी बॉडी एक रोल प्ले कर रही थी, इमोशंस प्ले कर रहे थे, मोटिवेशंस प्ले कर रहे थे, सोसाइटी से जो मैं माइंडलेसली बोरो कर रहा था वो एक प्ले कर रहे थे. So again, another thing that comes from Peter Thiel, who's the founder of PayPal, is, are my wants my own wants, or are they just borrowed?
Hmm.
So, so yes, all of this has a role, and I think time and again the world has had these kind of inquiries uh, in different geographies in different era. So that inquiries should hold true even in today's time, must hold true in today's time. How it is invoked, how people reach there to those inquiries and questions are different. Ekam Sat Vibra Bahuda Vadanti is a saying in Sanskrit, which means that जाना वही है लेकिन अलग अलग रास्ते से आएंगे, अलग अलग समय पे आएंगे हम लोग. तो एक तो ये एक तर्क है, एक इनपुट है. बट देन एक और चीज आती है कि पीपल हु आर स्लाइटली कॉन्शियस ऑफ, they become started they started becoming conscious of their actions and choices. What is their duty and role for people who are not there yet? And I think वहाँ पे दो तीन schools of thought है. One school of thought is just shut up and do your work. Don't try to preach. Don't try to tell
बराबर.
things. वो एक जरिया है. आपको जितना engage करना है वर्ल्ड से आप करके उसमें आप निकलते जाइए. एक दूसरी विचारधारा है, second school of thought है, which says no, engage, try and invoke those consciousness. So if I look at from that perspective, I think it is the job of every person who believes sincerely that they are at a slightly different consciousness quotient, that they should create conditions for other to become more conscious. Whether they become or not is secondary. In that sense, I think the roles of leaders are even more important because they impact so much on people that that follow them. So a mindless leader would take people off, in a direction, but a conscious leader might make the efforts to create those spaces of inquiry. कि बाहर से तो वो स्ट्रक्चर प्रोवाइड करें हम कम से कम, अब वो उनके अंदर जगता है नहीं जगता है वो उनके ऊपर है. Does that address what you were saying, or?
Yeah, because you have led me to a question that connects both our views,
जी जी.
your first answer and the view I have been carrying. So, so once I start being successful and I start reaching a point of where I am responsible for a team or many teams or a branch office or a head office or the entire unit, as the case may be, what has worked for me becomes de facto the way to work for everyone in my head very often, because I learned it the hard way. I did this and I did that, and that's how I reached here. So it's not necessary that I am trying to push other people. I may have myself done 90-hour weeks sometime back or 70 hours. Actually, those are just words. So where I come from is a methodology that worked for me. It makes me successful, that gives results in a way that the uh, company wants, the society wants, the typical ways of looking at things are sufficed. Uh, the individual inquiry merges here with the institutional, because once I reach a higher position, I kind of get to decide or maybe have a bigger say in how the institution is going to look at a certain subject. So at that point of time, does it work like that? Because you started with a disclaimer that you don't know enough about the context in which it was said. I want to add myself to it. Even I am unaware of what the context was, and it's more a topical thing that I have some feelings about, and that's why we are talking about it. is it reflects on no one except the matter itself. How do we approach something like this? Not about people as much as how an event that is being created or a mindset that is being created affects all of us. So how should all of us look at it from different points of view and perhaps come to an answer which is beneficial to all of us?
Um, One thing that comes up for me when I listen to this and just trying to tie back to what we were discussing is I think we live in a world now where uh, um, till about some time back we managed to have some kind of a world where we had gated institutions and a few thinkers who would talk about the way the way, whether in the transactional world or the transformational or transcendental world. Um, but today, I think we live in an era of hyper expression, hyper judgment, hyper opinionization, hyper criticism, hyper impulsiveness to respond and react, and all those kind of things. I think we live in a world which we call in our book as fast moving information goods, where it's too many information, too much of we don't know which information to select and which information to reject or add, edit to already the information that we have. So what this does is it gives rise to what we call as psychosocial savanna. एक सवाना था जो पुराने अफ्रीका में जहाँ कहते हैं कि वहीं से सारी शुरू हुई कहानी हमारी और whether we agree or not is a separate issue, but there was this whole idea of domesticating the wild. There was the wild of weather, the wild of uncertainty of food, the wild of other people claiming food or sex, a whole lot of things, or status. So over a period of time, through various experiments in blood and sweat and wars, we've been able to build the civilization that we find ourselves in right now. So, but अब क्या हो गया? अब information wild हो गई है अभी. We live in an information wild world. We don't know how to, when an information hits my feeds, I don't know how to make sense of it because it's wild, right? And so I think one of the things that we need to cultivate as a civilization is when somebody says something, uh, it's not whether we should criticize or not, appreciate or not. That's not what we are saying. I think as a civilization collectively, we need to relook at our impulsiveness to talk about it, to address it, and our thing to take a step back. Uh, how does this connect to the question that you were asking? कि अगर आपकी एक सक्सेस की एक धारा बन गई है और आप सक्सेसफुल हो गए हैं, अब लोग भी आपको कह रहे हैं आप सक्सेसफुल हैं, and you continue on that spree. So I think there my invocation would be twofold. One is सेल्फ कॉन्शियसनेस, सेल्फ अवेयरनेस कैसे आएगा, कब आएगा, पता नहीं, और जब तक नहीं आएगा यू विल कंटिन्यू टू पेडल दैट. समटाइम्स इट माइट वर्क, समटाइम्स इट माइट नॉट वर्क. दैट्स वन. सेकंड, इसका बहुत रिसर्च भी हुई है. देयर इज अ थिंकर कॉल्ड डेनियल पिंक. He calls it the hot hand fallacy. So he describes, I think, basketball as a game, but अगर हम क्रिकेट पे देखें तो इमेजिन कीजिए कोहली 3-4 मैचेस में बहुत अच्छे फॉर्म में चल रहा है, तो सडनली द एक्सपेक्टेशन इज फिफ्थ मैच में भी वो फॉर्म में रहेगा. वो कहते हैं ना, ही कैरीज द फॉर्म. दैट्स व्हाट यू से, और ही इज आउट ऑफ फॉर्म, राइट? I think that is what he's calling as hot hand fallacy. We have this psychological bug where we expect कि अगर ये यहाँ पे था तो ये भी होगा, ये भी सही होगा, ये भी सही होगा, ये भी सही होगा. Sometimes, of course, that's how they frame for a lot of people. और दूसरा प्रॉब्लम है, there is something called as the Dunning-Kruger effect. Our incompetence to know our own incompetence.
Okay, can you say that again?
It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect, which means our incompetence to know our own incompetence.
True.
Right? So we don't know at what level our skills have actually run out of steam and we need to upgrade them or switch. We are bad judge. Most of us are bad judge of our applicability and relevance of our skills. And then sometimes we just stretch it too far. And maybe with that, we either cause havoc outside because we have the veto in the room, or we become a laughing stock, at least, if not in front of each other, but behind the back. तो कब कॉन्शियसनेस आएगी, कब हम समझेंगे कि ये जो हमारी सक्सेस स्ट्रीक चल रही है, ये मे बी चांस से बेस्ड भी है, फ्लो भी है, बट इसके बियॉन्ड भी मुझे जाना चाहिए कि नहीं जाना चाहिए, या कब वो बंद हो जाएगी और हम स्टिल कंटिन्यू कर रहे हैं और हमको फीडबैक मिल रहा है, हम देख नहीं रहे, या फीडबैक मिल ही नहीं रहा है हमको सर्कल से. सो दैट्स व्हाट इज कमिंग अप फॉर मी. वुड यू वांट टू बिल्ड ऑन दैट और?
So, the beauty of the answers always is that you actually plug back into the question or an earlier question. So, we were talking about how individual responsibility matters and how self awareness and self consciousness about what we are doing, why we are doing. And while you did use the term metaphysics, in my head, it wasn't in the metaphysical space yet. Obviously, it can go, but at that point, it was more transactional. So while I am doing my job very well, but within the structure of the team, is it the right thing to do at the right time, or do I need to say it? Do I not? Do I hold the information that I have? But I will not go there right now because you invoked a much deeper thing that we need to understand that this information overload that is happening with us, and we need to first maybe build a set of practices for our own self, which helps us pause and see it. So whether we are a worker or a leader or a mid-management person or a secretary or a peon or anybody at all. So I have been in the last 2 weeks I happened to watch a web series called Mumbai Diaries, which is about the 26/11 uh, attack on the Taj, and then the second series is about the when Bombay was drowning, 26/7 I think. Uh, the beauty of the series, for whatever other flaws it may not have, is that they have covered the perspectives of everyone, right from the ward boy uh, to the topmost doctor, to the general administrator, to the police, to the ambulance people, to people who are perpetrating the problem or coming up with a solution. So you get to see a lot of these aspects of looking at a particular problem, which all of us are collectively facing. We may have different nuances, or somebody may be drowning, or somebody may have another problem. But my point to you is, do you think we can come up with a series of thought processes that individually people can pick up if they feel like that it is a workable option? Like we do, while it seems on the surface, how can you standardize this kind of thing? But I'm saying, even if you, so if a computer operator doesn't know how to operate a computer, it's not possible to hire him, or a designer doesn't know how to design. So there is only so much that you can help a person, because finally they will have to do the core job that is required. So if this was fed into our consciousness in some manner at some point of time, that these are things uh, to look at more carefully and build up from wherever we are. So a random quote, if I remember from Reader's Digest, that even if it falls in your lot to be a sweeper, sweep like Michelangelo made art, or something like that. So once you decide that these are things that help you and this is how you're going to tackle it, as much as possible for an individual, this not necessarily leading to direct indirect results in the short term, as a work ethic perhaps, as a thinking ethic. Is there anything that can be done? Again, I do not want to get into the same problem that because it has worked for me, I want to say that this works for everyone. But I'm saying if the modalities change, but still there is a focus on, okay, we also need to do this to become more aware individuals, better work people, more concerned human beings. Because one of the problems that I see at a bigger level all over the world right now, with climate change still not being acknowledged by many uh, in power all over the world, obviously. And still, many countries are on the route to development from that. What perhaps has is over as a time. We need to gear up and do something better. Do you see all of these threads somewhere converging individual, institutionally, country wise? Is there a possibility, or am I like just creating a bubble which may have no, um, which makes no sense to you at this point, perhaps?
Um, इसमें बहुत सारी चीजें हैं.
No.
They are all interlinked. So I'll try and address it in three, four buckets. Bucket one is um, stand-up comedy के यहाँ से एक example आता है कि the reason why stand-up comedy or comedy generally अच्छी लगती है हमको is that the stand-up comedian takes you in a certain path. You're following that one, and suddenly he shifts it, right? And then that gives you, oh, ये कहाँ से आ गया, right?
बराबर.
तो क्रिएटिविटी में भी वही होता है कि आप एक सर्टेन वे से उसको अलग वे में देखते हैं. बट इसका दूसरा रूप ये है कि while stand-up comedy creativity has the element of surprise or uncertainty that you like because it's uncertain, right? It was not known to you, and that is why it appealed to you. Um, but we also have a very tricky relationship with the other form of uncertainty where we get fearful, insecure, kleshas invoke ho jate hain hamare sare, right? So we have a dual relationship with uncertainty, disorder, unpredictability, and manageability. On one side, you like them; they're more adventurous, comic, or something. On the other side, you feel overwhelmed and small and inferior and weak. Um, why I invoke this is because I think a long human project has been to, as I said, domesticate the wild. कि जितना भी chaos दिख रहा है हमारे around, we just want a certain kind of an order. Even if it's not full order, at least an order that is comfortable so that we manage the disorder. Right? सबको चाहिए वैसे हमको सबको चाहिए. So I think it's the same with all the leaders and all the people of the planet. They want those kind of orders to be there. Um, but then I think we've entered into an era where we do not know the level of complexity we are dealing with right now. Um, I don't, I can't think of a single business leader or a political leader who understands the gravity of the complexity we are dealing with right now in our civilization. In absence of which, you would typically get statements which are slightly more uh, patronizing, instructional, uh, ordering as if to order the chaos, you're ordering it. कि line में आ जाओ, right? उसकी अपनी जगह है, of course, कभी कभी chaos को manage करने के लिए you do need to order and instruct so that you arrest massive downfall and then figure out how to get up from there. But that's not the point here. So that's one bucket. The second bucket is, I think, for a lot of people who are, I don't know, I may be wrong on this, but uh, look, there is a physical interface world. जो प्लम्बर है, मैकेनिक है, स्वीपर है, सीवरेज क्लीनर है, ऑटो वाला है, रिक्शा टैक्सी चालक है, सिक्योरिटी गार्ड है, ये फिजिकल वर्ल्ड में फिजिकल इंटरफेस कर रहे हैं. They're interfacing either with people, tools, or things very directly, right? So let's call that as a tangible production world. जहाँ पे कुछ tangibly produce हो रहा है. And then there's a whole layer of intangible production in the world. People who are supervising them. And then उसके भी supervisor है, उसके भी manager है, उसके ऊपर VP है, उसके ऊपर C है. There are layers and layers of abstraction from the tangible production world. Let's call that as an intangible production world. तो प्रॉब्लम क्या हो रहा है कि इंटेंजिबल प्रोडक्शन वर्ल्ड में मेरे पापा मुझे बचपन में कहते थे बिना हड्डी के जवान है चलाए जा. कई बार. So we lose sight of perspective of the other, we lose sight of the empathy of the other, what the other person is going through. I think we are not realizing a couple of other things. One is, let's imagine today's food quality is X, which is inferior to the food quality we had a few years back, hypothetically, let's say. It's not as nourishing as it was earlier. Let's imagine the climate is Y, which is not as nourishing and good as the past. So just on the basis of food and climate, the person who's in the tangible production world, उसके क्या उसके शरीर में उतनी ऊर्जा जा रही है, वो vitality जा रही है कि वो कितना काम कर पाएगा? We don't know. We obviously we're not talking about it. We're talking in different sections maybe. So जिस बंदे को स्लम में रह रहा है, एक छोटी सी 200 स्क्वायर फीट की जगह में रह रहा है, उसको मैं कह रहा हूँ कि तुम अच्छे से कपड़े पहन जाओ और ये ना ग्लास फसाड की बिल्डिंग में खड़े होके यू हैव टू बी वेल मैनर्ड, और वो सुन क्या रहा है पीछे जाके वहां पे गालियां, गाली गलौज, उसके मन में जो द्वंद चल रहा है उसको कोई एड्रेस अभी हम नहीं कर पा रहे, राइट? आई थिंक देयर आर सो मेनी कम्प्लेक्सिटीज that I think we don't, we first of all, we are not even aware of, forget solving for it. And how these are influencing people's actions and choices and behaviors, we have no clue about it. And in light of that, uh, there is this performance pressure, outsmarting pressure, outdoing pressure. For most people who've taken this upon themselves, that I have to outdo the other at the leadership level, at the company level, at the product level, at the creative idea level, तो वो कंपटीशन तो कम नहीं हो रहा है. सो दैट हाइपर कंपटीशन इज कीपिंग ऑन गोइंग, बट हमारी वाइटैलिटी हाइपो वाइटैलिटी की तरफ जा रही है. हाइपो मे भी जा रही है, मे भी नहीं जा रही है, आई हैव नो क्लू. So that's the second bucket I want to invoke, Bunty. The first was uncertainty in our relationship. The second is perspective, empathy, what it means to perform, what it means to do, and what are the ingredients, and how is the climate and food contributing to that vitality. That's the second bucket. I think the third bucket is, despite of all of this, you do find a lot of people uh, who fall in one of the three, four categories. Category one get extremely overwhelmed and then they create coping mechanisms. The coping mechanisms can come in various forms: asserting power, being passively aggressive, being manipulative, gossip, rant, all of that. Second category could be, people like Dolly Chaiwala, or this person in Nagpur or some place where you look at him, एक चाय का ठेला है, and the way he's making tea is what you mentioned, Michelangelo जैसे art बना रहे. He's become a sensation, and now after Dolly Chaiwala became famous, every second day you find on Instagram and Facebook several people who कोई भज्जी बना रहा है, कोई रोटी बना रहा है, कोई गार्डनिंग कर रहा है. The way they're doing their work is such a flow experience for them, right? Uh, the only departure there I have is, इसको मैं पीछे टाई करता हूँ कि मैं अकेले अगर किसी चीज से काम कर रहा हूँ तो फ्लो एक्सपीरियंस बहुत आसान है, बट मुझे अगर बंटी के साथ फ्लो एक्सपीरियंस करना है तो वो जो डांस है उसमें बहुत सारी कम्प्लेक्सिटीज इन्वॉल्व हो जाती है. बिकॉज
Yeah.
आई थिंक द मोमेंट यू वर्क विद अ ह्यूमन, unless you're in a friend zone, a non-friend zone, creating flow experience is very difficult for a lot of people because they don't know how to manage the intangible. आपकी
Yeah.
सब्जेक्टिविटी है, मेरी सब्जेक्टिविटी है, उसको कैसे डील करें, हम कॉन्वर्सेशन कैसे हेल्दी बनाएं. तो these are the three buckets that I bring, and then the fourth bucket where you said, are there still things that people can do? Well, I think if you're talking to people, then it will be on the people, that what can you do at your level, and do you reflect on your actions and choices? What are you doing for your mind and body to make them healthy? I mean, that's a very interesting question. आपकी संगत क्या है? फीड्स में आपकी संगत क्या है और फिजिकल वर्ल्ड में आपकी संगत क्या है, वो इम्पोर्टेंट है. So sorry for this long four bucket
This is beautiful.
response.
I thought there are answers connecting to other answers in your longish explanation as well. So empathy struck out for me as one of the very core ways we can uh, look at this aspect, because that is one aspect that one doesn't honestly think of, and sometimes it may. So one of the bigger kicks in life I've had is that uh, the the security people in my society are aware of my love for chai. So once a while, initial days, the manager and these guys were having chai, and they said, "No, no, wait, wait, wait," and they called for chai for me. Okay, because every time the meeting happens, and I tell the manager I want this kind of chai or that kind of chai. So he knew and they knew, and so suddenly it became. And I've been very uh, not a master slave approach to things, and it's very human. And as much as is possible, obviously, there are days when there are complaints or some, so I put it out there. But it's more like we are all doing what we are here to do. Let's do it as happily as possible. So, but they're calling me and feeding me chai by paying, I thought was a big deal to me, because while chai may itself not be a big deal, but it just goes to show that they are kind, and when given a chance, they would not hesitate of uh, giving it to somebody else. And in this case, somebody who is more financially stable and able than they themselves are, without feeling the need to either justify it or something. So I thought that was a wonderful example of understanding for myself that this can work so easily. The other day, there was another example that happened. There was a lady who had kind of lost it, and she had a brick in her hand uh, on one of the turns near my society. And of all, I personally would have also gone away or something, but somehow the traffic kind of made my bike stop exactly parallel to her. And I just touched her shoulder and I said, "Fake do, lag jayega kisi ko." She kind of looked at me very angrily, and I said, and I kind of was pacifying her, ke fake do, lagega. So then she was a little unsure of what she was doing because she had kind of mental problems, it seemed. So then for some reason she kept the brick. And then I said, "Do you want to have something?" She said, "No." But I kind of realized that since she was being good, so maybe that reward thing would work with her, that people are good enough. Whatever trauma she had in her mind, I am unsure. So I went and bought her a cold drink of some kind, and uh, some kind of unusual one. And the moment she had that, I could see on her face that she had never had something like that, and wo expression change ho gaya, and then she was normal, which she wasn't 2 minutes back. And there were a lot of crowds. Had she thrown that, so somebody's head would have broken. Like, it was quite a there was a Sikh function happening due to Guru Gobind Singh's birthday some time back. So that was the event, and there were like thousands of people on the street at that point. So my point is that on an individual level, that one takes a call. I have not that I'm trying to brag that I am very kind or something. It just happened very organically. I sometimes I also run away when I can't deal with the problem. So there is somebody who is in a very bad shape and I do not know what to do. So I convince myself of something and I just run away because I just cannot manage it. And it has happened over years. Off late, I seem to have a bit of strength that I will stand there and at least listen. But many times I have run away. Like if I see a major problem that I don't know and people are there, then I'll convince myself that the people are going to sort it out, and a small accident or something. I don't know. So my question to you is, if individually at whatever level we are, this becomes uh, it's not being said by a leader that all of us have to do it, because then it kind of cancels the empathy part of it. The leader himself has to come from the place of empathy, and some of the leaders that we know who are no longer talking like leaders these days because of various political positions and drama happening all over the world. But a lot of them have been good earlier, and they've been running successful companies because they've had a successful work ethic within the company, uh, giving a kind of space where the flow happens more naturally. So they did come from a good space for the longest time. So do you think there is something in particular that can come from just that one word that you use, empathy? Because I thought that is a good solution to a lot of things. If I put myself in your shoes right now, when you told me we can just do this for 45 minutes, are you still open to the idea? So I just need to think, okay, yes, he's hard pressed, but he's willing to give his time. Let's have a conversation and see where it goes. So all I need to, I cannot be complaining that no, I can't have to. We've done a 20-minute episode, you and me, when we didn't have time. So it's not a bad deal. And that has been one of our better episodes also, I would like to think. So is there any reflection you can give more as a global understanding, and how can that kind of be invoked? Because you are also a thought leader of sorts, or rather a Vidur kind of person in the this. How successful or not, I do not know. But you've spent a lot of time introspecting on such things, which are what I would call softer skills or softer mindsets, subtler understandings of the connections between conflicting areas. Do you think there is something that can come up? And you've done some experiments earlier. Thank you, uh, being one example that comes to mind. Are there is there a need for reflecting more and trying to get leaders or other people in society, opinion leaders, to work on this and talk about this? We talk about our success and being in this party or that party and glamorous page three functions, and so why can this not be a initially it will be bragging, but it's okay. It's not a bad deal, because technically it tells me that as human beings we are all wanting the right thing to happen, more or less. Individually we may have our flaws and we may create to the chaos rather than the order. But what if the order came from our own inner workings? Is there a way to create spaces for inner workings? That's my question. And which are not temples or gurdwaras, or because there again the religious overtones happen, and uh, there are some demarcations that happen. Rightly, wrongly is a different topic altogether. But so if I grow my hair and beard, and there are people in the world that do not know that it is a normal thing for a Sardar to do this. So very often, off late, I have to tell them that this happens, and they have no clue. So now this is a lack of communication. More than I mind it sometimes, but most times I don't, because I understand that people have come from a completely different background. They have no clue. ऐसे भी होते थे, मतलब पहले ये क्वेश्चन नहीं था, बट अभी है. So we've got to change, and we've got to figure out, tell people why this is so and what is the understanding that we have. And it should come from a place of empathy, not anger. So, sorry, various thought processes, but actually one line of thought. Can we create a system which rewards this kind of inner search or processes or any such thing? And maybe what we are doing is something on those lines.
एक कहीं पे पहले ना मैंने एक चीज पढ़ी थी कि there are years when nothing happens and there are days when years happen.
Yeah.
Um, there are conversations when libraries happen, and there are conversations where only alphabets happen.
Wonderful.
So I think this subject is a place where only alphabets will happen. We won't get libraries through. Um, that's the first starting point. The second starting point is I think in around 2010 to 2015, there's a particular institute called the Santa Fe Institute
Okay.
in US, and they tried to assemble different thinkers of the world to look at where we are heading. And you had various, people from spirituality, people from behavioral science, economics, multidisciplinary gathering थी वो. और काफी चीजों पे काम भी किए वो, बट वो फिर डिसमेंटल हो गई somehow. पर उनकी एक कोर इंसाइट ये थी कि दे सेड दैट करंट लिविंग इन द वर्ल्ड इज ऑल दे डिफाइनिंग एज अ गेम ए लिविंग गेम ए. We're all drafted into game A whether we like it or not. And game A is operating under certain principles which no single person has made it, but collectively we have been just being nudged and nudging in that direction. Right? You don't have a CEO of the world. There is no CEO of the world. There's no architect of the world. It's just that there are different forces different people who are contesting for various power and assertion, and you get the world that you're living in. But all of this they're defined as game A. गेम ए के जो मैकेनिक्स है, जो डायनामिक्स है, जो प्रिंसिपल्स हैं, दे आर मूविंग अस इन द डायरेक्शन ऑफ hyper competitiveness, which is very, which is out competing each other just for compete, just for something, not for the improvement per se, right? They say that we need a game B. Game B will need different principles for individuals, for the institutions. It will require a very different political, economic, social setting. As we speak, there are almost 1,000 experiments happening in the world in the game B space. But game B is also being discovered, so nobody has an answer to that yet. And उसमें भी बहुत सारे failure modes भी है, बहुत सारी चीजें हैं. तो I think we are talking about that level of thing where, it's a thing where only alphabets will happen. We can't get libraries through. So I think it will boil down to two or three things. One is whatever one can do on one's own self. Like I am also reminded of a Chinese proverb. Ki when I was young, I wanted to change the world. When I grew a little older, I said, let me change the nation. Then I grew a little older. Then I said, let me do with the city. Then with my neighborhood. Then with my family. He says, now I'm old enough. The only person I want to change is myself. So I think that's telling us something. I think, but the only invocation I would take from there and slightly depart is going back to the thing. Ki if you have certain consciousness that you feel is a slightly different texture and meaning of it, then yes, one you offer that to all the interactions around with people, things, nature, everything. Or sometimes if you feel you can create your sangha, create your sharing mechanism where people might take it up. Uh, so level one is self, level two is interpersonal, level three is I think we should not stop from imagining a radical top down, not from the sense of somebody is going to come as a charismatic leader, not that, but major shifts in the system itself. उसकी तरफ काम करना होगा और बहुत मेहनत करनी पड़ेगी, बहुत डायलॉग्स होंगे, बहुत एक्सपेरिमेंट्स होंगे, गुड फेथ भी होंगे, बैड फेथ भी होंगे, फेलियर्स होंगे. तो तीनों सिस्टम, तीनों लेवल, नेस्टेड लेवल्स पे हमको काम करना होगा, मुझे ऐसा लगता है, सेल्फ, इंटरपर्सनल एंड सिस्टम लेवल.
Run out of questions because the whole scenario of this last discussion that we did on this, how can we create a system, seems to me very much a valid way to think and pursue, perhaps, in terms of leaders like you, whom I look at for spending time. So while there are things that you're doing which are practical and companies call you for advice on those kind of things, but perhaps a product or a service or something that simulates your own journey from what you were to what you are uh, can be thought about or proposed is coming to me right now. So I also thought it's a wonderful thing starting on a 90-hour thing. We are actually 24/7 thing where you are living with yourself and your mind. So how do I ensure that it is, in Buddha's words, for the benefit of many?
One thing that is just coming up, the 90-hour work life uh, needs to be seen in context of 90 years unworked up life.
Truly, I think we will lose our way often enough, whether because of leaders or our own shortcomings. You did mention that all of them came together and got dismantled at some point of time. So there is always the all conditioned things. Decay is also what Buddha said. So whatever comes together will at some point depart. But still, having said that, I think if we are spending enough time, and this has been a nice provocation in hindsight, when we started, I had no clue where we are going to go with this. But thank you for your time, your provocations. There are quite a few things that I have to actually relook and spend some time on, because these are all, like you said, we are talking in alphabets. The mind seems to be running in. Like a lot of things seem that these alphabets might make sense if they come together in this form or that form. Uh, yeah, may all beings be happy. May all leaders and people work for the benefit of humankind in general, not just their own companies and countries. I think we definitely need a handle on being humans first rather than everything else, perhaps. So, thank you so much for this
Thanks,
wonderful
man.
conversation.
Thank you. Thank you.
I
Thank you,
shall see you
Bharat.
soon.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.